Welcome to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. Legal issues simplified through real client stories and real-world experiences. Creating simplicity in 3, 2, 1.
And welcome back to another episode of the Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael, the Reader Byrd.
Thanks, Brad. As a business and healthcare law firm, we meet a lot of interesting people and learn their amazing stories. Before I introduce today's guest, I spent some time yesterday looking for an interesting story to get us started.
All right, I'm interested. I have my sense of humor is pretty low bar since I'm almost like a 13-year-old boy. But so why don't tell us what some interesting stories learned? Okay.
Well, Brad, my sense of humor is much different. I only curate Pulitzer Prize type stories. Well, and this story. This was maybe not quite to that level. I found a story out of China titled Desert Scenic Spot Under Investigation for Ensnaring Tourists in Expensive Toilet Trap. I think they should have titled the article 2020 in a Nutshell.
All right. We want more. We want more, Michael.
Okay.
More.
Well, so here's the story. Apparently, the suspects would put this at this scenic stop in the desert in China. They put the portable bathroom building at this rest stop far enough out in the sand so that when cars would stop to park, they would be too far into the sand and they'd get stuck. And then they would charge exorbitant fees to tow them out of the sand so that they could leave. And I think the equivalent in American dollars was over $400 that they were charging to get them out. And in fact, 2 of the suspects, I think there was 5 that were arrested and 2 are in jail currently.
All right, Mike. You have been pushing me for weeks, and everyone who knows me, I have some of the most terrible dad jokes of all time in my brain that just constantly come out, but there's way too much content here. So I guess number 1 was they were arrested for the lavatory larceny, or maybe they went from the outhouse to the big house.
Oh, man, I really asked for it.
But, of course, my 13-year-old brain really started kicking off in a high gear. But first off, I want to keep our audience, and they stop. If I keep going that direction, I'll probably stop listening. And secondly, I've already embarrassed my family enough, so I'll probably stop there. But, Michael, my only question to you is normally when you give us a little story intake of a story, you do a good job of actually tying the story to our guests. And I'd like to think that you're not just planning to connect the toilet trap to our guest today.
Challenge accepted. So 2 parts of this story make me think of our guest. First, our guest has published one of the all-time top 100 books on sales, and I know that he has a better sales strategy than entrapping someone who needs to go to the bathroom. And second, this book has been published in over 12 different languages and has been published in China. So the suspects would have had an opportunity to learn from our guest, Steve Harvill, today. So a brief, formal introduction on some of the trophies on Steve's wall, which are too long to list. We take up the whole podcast on that. The book, which is how we met Steve a few years ago, is 21 Secrets of $1 Million Sellers. He's the founder of the creative consulting firm Creative Ventures. His client base, in addition to ByrdAdatto, which, of course, I think should be at the top of the list. But there's a few others you may have heard of that are maybe a little less familiar, like IBM, General Mills, Wells Fargo, Southwest Airlines, Samsung, JCPenney, Microsoft, Apple, AIA, Zappos, and Alliance.
But I think most importantly, you started with the number 1 client, which is ByrdAdatto. So I thought that was a good way to start. Most people have heard of ByrdAdatto listening to this. Very few have heard of IBM.
Yeah, true.
Clearly. Well, I just want to add one thing, and we'll get to Steve in a second, but I still remember the day I was happening to read in the Dallas Morning News about a book review about this book called 21 Secrets of $1 Million Sellers. I read about the author. It interested me. I ended up buying the book in about 15 pages into it. I liked it so much, I bought the book for Michael. I said, I think you need to read this. And Michael liked it so much, he actually found the author on LinkedIn and said, hey, really, really enjoying your book. The author said, well, I'm up in Dallas sometime. Let's grab breakfast sometime. And fast forward, we ended up grabbing breakfast. It was incredible. It was fun catching up and really learning his story, and then eventually, obviously, working with our firm. So, all because I actually read the newspaper. So I won't make that mistake too often, but it was a good day to read a book review.
Awesome. Well, Steve, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm still taking notes on the great idea of getting those people stuck in the sand. It's a closed market idea, highly leverageable, probably can be used in a wide variety of surfaces. I'm in.
Awesome. Well, Steve, Steve, our theme this year, as our audience has been hearing, is for the Legal 1-2-3s with ByrdAdatto, is really thinking outside the box. And you have been a successful creator and consultant for many years, but you had never written a book. And based on our breakfast that I was talking about earlier, as you had kind of said, you never really thought about it. You never really aspired to writing a book until the 21 Secrets. So talk about your decision to write a book. And what was your journey like when you went through that experience?
Well, I had actually written another smaller book that we did on Amazon Press that was kind of an experiment, but I'd never written anything for a major publisher. And so the most common asked question we would get all the time is, do you have a book? And my answer was always no. And people would always then follow up with the classic why. And I would ask them, I would say, do you know how to write a book? And they would go, no. And I said, well, either do I. And so I never really needed one for any of the business we did or platforms we did. But I was giving a program around the ideas that are the foundation of the book. And a company came up to me afterwards and whisked me aside and sat me down and said, this is a book. This is going to be a huge book for you. And we would love to be involved with you in writing it. We'll help you write it. We'll market it. We'll design the cover. We'll get it into bookstores. And we only charge $60,000. And I went, well, I said, I'm pretty wicked smart, but I said, let me make this leap right here. In other words, you want me to pay you $60,000 for me to write a book? And they said, well, the model works kind of, and I said, at the end of the day, that's what we're looking at here. And I didn't have any interest doing that, but it made me think a little. And I called a friend who was an agent in New York, a literary agent. Now, I didn't know she was one of the top literary agents in New York at the time. And I told her about the conversation, and she goes, well, what was the idea? And I go, it's based on this research we've done. She goes, send me an outline. So I said, okay. So I did like some half rear-ended outline, and I sent it off to my agent. And she said, are you willing to do a treatment of this idea? She goes, because I can not only sell this idea, I can sell this idea to a publisher in one day. And I went, well, what's a treatment? Oh, she goes, you need to hire an editor to help you do a treatment, which is, like the table of contents, a sample chapter, what's the book about? It's like 37 pages of stuff. So I said, well, okay, I don't have a professional editor. She set me up with someone who turned out to be one of the cornerstones of me being able to do the book. We did the thing. We sent it to Lynn. She called me up and she said, Steve, there's going to be a bidding war for this content.
Wow.
And I went, is that like what I think it is? She goes, yeah, there's going to be a bunch of publishers bidding to get your book. And I'll call you back Monday and I'll tell you what they are and I'll tell you the one to choose. And the conversation literally went like that. And I went, okay. And Monday she called me up and she goes, here they are. Here's the one you should go with and why. And I said, okay, let's go. We'll do that. And she stopped because we have a history together. And I'm an ex-surfer, which has a tendency to make you not take life very seriously. And she said, Steve, if you say yes right now, they will have a contract overnighted to you tomorrow. You and an attorney will look at it. And when you sign it, you're going to have to write this book. This isn't like, where you get to just kind of cruise around. You're going to have to do it. And I said, okay, I understand. And the contract came and we went through all this stuff. And I sat down with my wife and my team in Dallas. And I said, guys, if I do this, it's going to take me a while away from the company. doing stuff. And I turned to my wife and I said, "Hun, it's going to take me down in the Batcave writing on Sundays and Saturdays." She said, "Let's do it." And we signed it, sent it in, had my editor, and that started the process of creating the book.
Wow. Well, I've never heard the word treatment before, and I think they're underselling it when that means 37 pages.
Yeah, I thought so too. There were a number of things that would surprise a first-time author. Like in the book, it'll say like the book is going to be 75,000 words. And so after I signed it, I asked my wife, I go, "Laura, how long is that? Is that like 300 pages, 500 pages?" And she goes, "I have no idea how long that is." So what you end up doing early in your writing is you're typing, and then you're looking at word count. Typing, looking at word count, typing, trying to figure out how does this all fit together when you're learning how to create. Now, I've written a lot of stuff in my career. I've written for major magazines, industry magazines. I've designed programs. I've written our newsletter, which goes to 30,000 people, has been around for 15 years. I had a syndicated magazine column. But there's a difference between writing short form and writing long form. Mm-hmm. Long form is a narrative arc that connects ideas along a theme, right? Short form is just, here's my idea. I'm just going to write this. And we had 2.5 years of research and to go through to create the basis for the book. And so my editor, she turned me from a guy that writes, she turned me into a writer. And I discovered after about it took me about 3 chapters to even figure out what I was doing, where there was a methodology to it. And I studied other writers and did they write with music on? Did they write with silence? What did they use as a system of recording stuff? So I was studying the whole time as the process went. And then as it started to go along, there's 21 chapters in the book. By the time I was probably to 8, I knew what I was doing at that point.
Well, talk a little bit about the research that's kind of the foundation to the book, because I find that fascinating as to how you arrived at your 21 secrets.
We work with a lot of large companies that have sales forces. And I got a call, and a large company in New York was getting ready to survey their international sales force, and they wanted me on the team of the survey to help them simplify the process, keep it in a simple context. That's the expertise of our firm, is simplicity. And so I didn't even ask. I foolishly violated one of my laws, which is speed should never outweigh thought. And instead of thinking about it, I just jumped on a plane and flew to New York. And I was in this big conference room with big leather chairs, and they had already hired a firm to do the survey, and they were going over the questions, and I was just sitting there. I didn't know hardly anybody in the room but one other person. And finally I stopped and I said, "Is that all the questions you're going to ask?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, you're not asking what anybody actually does or what they feel or how they think. You're asking all questions that on a scale of 1 to something, how many do you do it? And you're going to get answers like 7.3. Like, what's a 0.3 of anybody doing anything?" I said, you're not asking the right questions. And the person said, yeah. Look, that's not why you're here. You're here to do this. So I said, "Oh, okay." And I just did that. And then I jumped on the plane, went back to the office, and got another call to go to a national sales meeting in Las Vegas, where the company every year did this gigantic meeting, $1 million worth of funds for the meeting, flew people in. Big, gigantic thing. And they said, "Steve, I want you to come. I want you to go to as many sessions as you can. And at the end, I want you to tell us if it's worth spending $1 million every year for our sales force." That was kind of, in a nutshell, that was the project. So I went to all the workshops, took a bunch of notes. And then the last night was the awards dinner. And everybody's been to things like this, right? Mm-hmm. You're in rounds of 10. There's a pre-plated cheesecake slice and a pre-plated salad and rolls that are so hard you can't even split them open, and then some kind of a chicken or steak or something is served to you. And all these people were winning awards, and they were getting tons of stuff, crystal stuff and wooden stuff and stuff to hang and stuff for their desk. And then at the end, it came time for the salesperson of the year. And that person got a large bonus. And they had like a Tiger Woods size check. And they held it up. And when I looked at it, I almost fell out of my chair. It was so large. And I turned to the person sitting next to me, and I go, it was a woman that when I go, how did she win that? And the guy turns to me and goes, she sold more than any of us. Like, as though that was like, right, like that part I had figured out. I said, no. How did she do it? What did she do? The guy goes, I don't know. And I asked around the table. Nobody knew, and nobody cared. So as I was flying back to Dallas, I was feverishly sketching the idea that became the book, that I would create the right questions. I would ask only pinnacle performers their answers, only people that were at the top of their field. I would ask them all the same 10 questions. And what I would do is I would look for the patterns in their response. And if I could find patterns that they all shared, things they all did the same no matter what they were selling, I thought I had a pretty good strategic platform. And that's kind of how the study of the book came about.
What I loved about that story, besides the passion that you told, was you described something that some people may never see again, a big giant room full of people in a biggest showroom.
This was like spouses included. So it was in the grand ballroom. I think it was at the Wynn, or maybe at I can't remember what hotel it was.
Yeah.
But this is a client that had been a client of ours for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was just shocked at the lackadaisical attitude of them thinking there's nothing they could learn from her when she's clearly the best one in the room.
Right. Well, that's a perfect headway into like the next piece of it. So you've got this idea, but we were just kind of leading into it a little bit, but what should businesses be thinking about as they head into 2021 with such a big shift? That's what's happening right now in 2020.
That's a really interesting question. And I would say I'm not a futurist. I don't know why we don't have jetpacks or flying cars or anything like that. But there are two things that will tell you kind of about what's going to happen. One is the past. If you look into the past always tells you the truth. The future speculates, but the past tells you the truth. So what has happened when we've recovered from disastrous elements before? And we have a history of that. Not only does America have a history of that, the planet has a history of that. And we have a tendency to fall backwards, not forwards. When they first opened the beaches in Southern California during the COVID crisis, and they told everybody social distancing and stay away, and you saw pictures of the beach, it looked like the 4th of July. They didn't pay attention to anything. And that's because the comfort of the past pulls them back to the way things were, right?
Right.
So from a sales perspective and from a business perspective, the way things are in this very short blink of an eye in the spectrum of what business is going to cause some significant changes, but it's not going to be everything changing. People will still be looking for relationships when they're buying something that doesn't come in a box. I mean, if you buy something in a box that's delivered by a guy in brown shorts in a brown truck with brown shoes, that's different. If you're buying something that's not stuff, you're buying insight and knowledge and perspective. And those are relationship items. And that's still going to be a very big deal. And the people that are laying the foundation for that now will come out more successful than those that aren't. Our clients aren't constructs of data. That's just a piece of what they are. Mm-hmm. They're human beings. And they'll be looking for help along those lines when whatever happens.
It'll be interesting too, because it's it on the relationship piece. I'm hoping that Zoom is not the new normal.
I don't think you have too big of a worry. I wrote a piece on purpose. What does purpose mean in these times, right? Usually when you're all working together, the work environment creates the social fabric that kind of gives you purpose. And when that's removed, how do you do that, right? What do you do? And are you always going to be, at home with your kids and cats and everything like that? If you look at great innovation, it doesn't really matter what you look at. You can look at Jonas Salk's polio vaccine. You can look at the creation of the microwave oven. It doesn't really matter. Anything innovative happened when people got together. It didn't happen siloed and in isolation. It happened when people shared ideas, that when they were in conflict, when they were exploring. And all of that isn't going to change. And you cannot do all of that. That's my hot sports opinion.
One thing I love what you said about that is that it's so true, is that going back to that relationship of the relationship items versus the brown box items, it rings true, because I think with a lot of people, what happens is they end up, they think this is what the new norm is going to be, that they're only going to do school via Zoom, or you're only going to have meetings via Zoom. And that connection that is so important and vital, especially when you're advising someone, is lost somehow. And
I don't know why they would think that. That there would be nothing ever, we would never get together again. It's because they either haven't looked at what happens, or the time. One of the things that blends in our mind, we don't have an organ in our body that tracks time, right? We can track what we see, what we hear, what we smell, taste, and touch, but we don't have an internal organ that tracks time. And so time gets all messed up during this stuff. And I think people start to think that that's the way it's going to be forever. And my perspective in working with a lot of large clients is it's a temporary thing. How temporary, or what the new thing's going to look like, you might want to ask somebody that claims to be a futurist. I'm not. But I will tell you this. If you want to learn what's going to happen, you should look at yesterday. When Bezos started Amazon Plus, he looked at catalog sales and he said, what are the three things everybody has always wanted? Always. Lots of stuff, cheap stuff, get stuff fast. And if you could do all three of those things, you know what you could actually do? You could charge people money to give us money, which is Amazon Prime. I'm going to charge you money so that you will give me money. I mean, I'm sure it sounded crazy when they did it, but it was all based on this idea of what always has worked. What's always been there? What's Bill Gates' famous have we seen this problem before, and what can we learn from it from the past? Those are the two questions. And the questions that other people should be asking is, how can I be better than I was when I left? That when I come back, how can I be better? Which helps my career, my company. That's what they should be thinking about. And this time gives ample opportunity to do that, and learn different learning formats that have been out there.
Well, I love your perspective. There's a lot of wisdom there, because I think that people almost get a level of anxiety trying to predict the future, because as we know, no one's a futurist, and you have something that people can grab onto with something that actually happens. I'm just not. I'm an optimist by nature, and so I always think things will work out. I think that we're really good at fixing problems, and science is really helpful along lines like that. And you can accelerate, like we've seen. It's just amazing the level of acceleration that can happen when you give somebody a couple $2 billion. All of a sudden, they go to work. That's awesome. Well, we one final thing before we kind of transition is I can't tell the audience enough how impactful this book was to Brad and I, and Creative Ventures has been for us. And I know, Steve, you've graciously offered to sign books for or sign the
I'll do a book plate for anybody that wants the book. Tell me they bought it. Just, you can give them my email address or something somehow, and I'll send directly a customized, personalized, signed element to anybody that wants it.
Yeah, in fact, your contact information for those listening to this podcast will be below in the notes section, so they'll be able to reach out to you.
Yeah, sign up for the newsletter, read the blog, look at the videos. We launched a new video series this year called Did You Know?, which is our new story series. We just posted a new one on breaking barriers. So yeah, anybody, all that stuff's available, and I'll be happy to talk to anybody anytime. Awesome.
And yeah, the content's awesome. So I encourage everyone to check that out. We're really grateful to have you on the Legal 1-2-3s with ByrdAdatto. We're going to say goodbye, go into a commercial, and on the other side, Brad and I will share our insights from today's episode.
Great. It's been an honor. I'd do it anytime for you guys.
Thank you so much.
Many business owners use legal counsel as a last resort rather than as a proactive tool that can further their success. Why? For most, it's the fear of unknown legal costs. ByrdAdatto's Access Plus program makes it possible for you to get the ongoing legal assistance you need for one predictable monthly fee. That gives you unlimited phone and email access to the legal team, so you can receive feedback on legal concerns as they arise. Access Plus, a smarter, simpler way to access legal services. Find out more. Visit ByrdAdatto.com today.
And welcome back to the Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd. And now, Michael, it was really fun catching up with Steve on so many different levels. He had a lot of fun things to say. I almost wanted to bring in the fact that the toilet trap that he was discussing, he almost fell into that with the pay me $60,000 so that you can write a book for us. That was, I think, that his toilet trap. But he didn't get stuck in the sand for that one, did he?
No.
But typically after an episode, we kind of jump into some ideas of how we can think through processes from a legal perspective. But today, I think we, having someone show up who both you and I read his book and it was impactful for us. Maybe let's shift a little bit and maybe give our audience a little insight to us, or what are some of the books that you have read that has impacted you from a professional perspective?
Yeah, and we're small business owners, just like many of our audience, and so the three books that I came up with have had a massive impact on running a business. The first is no coincidence is 21 Secrets of $1 Million Sellers by Stephen Harvill, our guest today, and he was part of the reason we asked him on, because how impactful that book was for me. And there is so much validation that comes from the things that we had kind of wisdom we gained along the way on doing things right. I mean, we don't think of ourselves as lawyers, as sellers, but we are building relationships with clients, and clients hire us, and there are things you do to help form stronger connections, and so it is extremely impactful. The second book is actually a children's book that we've talked about at ByrdAdatto University here with the team. Have You Filled a Bucket Today by Carol McLeod, and it's a really popular book. Many of you have probably heard of it or read it with your kids, but professionally it really helps when you're thinking of a team and thinking about kind of the attitude and heart of a team that people that you want to work with, really being others focused instead of inwardly focused. And it really just resonated to me. And I read it for the first time, reading it to my now 11-year-old daughter, Alex, but she was little at the time. She was 5 or 6 years old. And then the final one is probably the first book I read, was The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. I can still remember, Brad, when we first started working together, this was one of those books I brought in to you and said, you got to read this book. And
for our audience, it was not because we were dysfunctional. Just that's not why, right? I'm just making sure.
No, Brad. You can think that. No, I'm just kidding. No, yeah, you're right. It's a fair question, but the book is just talking about how meetings are run and how businesses are run, and it really focuses on leadership, and it was really impactful to help kind of hold a mirror up to how, at the time we were at our old firm, how are we doing things, and how can we become more effective and efficient and have a stronger connection with one another.
Yeah. And like you, when it comes to books, I've definitely been someone who really enjoyed Steve's book, 21 Secrets of $1 Million Sellers. It was, I guess, impactful enough, as I've shared before. Not only did I buy it from you, but I bought it for other family members because I liked it so much, because I felt like it really did ring true in a lot of things that, how do you interact with individuals, and it really brought to light things either I could do better or that we were already doing. So I really enjoyed that. Jim Collins has a book out there, Good to Great, which I'm sure people have done hours and hours of podcasts on. But if you haven't read it, I know Michael and I have both read it, and it has a lot of great ways of rethinking how you're running your business. And is it, the concept being, are you running it good, and do you want to run it great? And it really challenges you to rethink a lot of ways in which, from hiring employees and making sure they're in the right spots. Or there's so many factors that I probably could spend an hour talking it alone. And the last book that I brought up it's called Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win. And this book was, I had read some reviews on, I was trying to look for another book to read about running a professional business, and it just kept coming up. And yes, as a lot of people know, that I do love my military guys, and I do love the Navy SEALs. I've got a lot of buddies who are SEALs. So I didn't want to just go out and buy it because it was written by SEALs. But the more I read about the reviews on it, Jocko, I'm going to mispronounce his last name, but Willink and Leif Babin are two guys who really take stories that they had where they said, hey, this isn't right the way we as SEALs are doing it, and we need to correct it and find a better way to do it. And then because they also have their own consulting company, they then took those applications that they learned in the military and applied it to real-world situations. So the book's great because you can see how they're engaging in a firefight, and something goes wrong. And obviously, in their case, when something goes wrong really poorly in the sense of loss of life or limb. But what they learned from those lessons were so valuable that they could actually start applying these in the business world where, as we've talked about before, you may not be loss of life, but you might be loss of income or loss of the big sale that you need to continue to grow your business. So either way, all of these books that Michael's mentioned, I've mentioned, I know that for us, they're impactful. Love to hear from an audience of other ideas they have of books that they've read. But I think these are important things as you grow a business, to find something that has an impact to you and to be able to read it and share it with others.
Awesome. Well, I know, Brad, based on when I believe this is going to be released, that I will leave this by saying Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yes, and this is and for those who are listening to us and wants to run out and try to grab an idea for a book to give someone, we just gave you at least 5 good ideas.
And most importantly, 2021 is around the corner.
Yay!
Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, if you like this episode, please subscribe, make sure to give us a 5-star rating, and share with your friends.
You can also sign up for the ByrdAdatto newsletter by going to our website at ByrdAdatto.com.
ByrdAdatto is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by ByrdAdatto. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.